Hi, and welcome to Your Truth Explored, the podcast where we unpack your truths to bring clarity, understanding, and insight into what lies ahead. My name is Rodney Reynders. Today we have the privilege of chatting with Jason Blythe. Jason isn't your typical speaker. He is a torchbearer. A former international athlete, he won multiple national titles as well as the top tens in the Junior World Championships. As a musician, he's featured on a track with Ludacris and recorded with producers behind Linkin Park and Snoop Dogg. Born to a brain-injured woman after a sexual assault, he saw his first psychologist at 2 when his mum tried to kill him. He left home at 15, quit school at 16, and now builds a life on one repeated choice: take back the pen and write a different ending. His message is simple: pain isn't here to break us, it creates who we could become. So sit back, strap in, and let's explore your truth with Jason Blythe. Well, it's a real privilege. Nice to see you, Jason.
Thank you very much for having me, Rodney.
And Jason, you have quite the story. And I was talking to Ian Westmoreland, who I absolutely am a big fan of his mission in the world. And he spoke in glowing terms of your mission. So maybe you could share that with us.
For me, mate, my whole journey has been this discovery of agency, of what I call reclaiming the pen and writing the story that we want. I came from a particularly difficult background and upbringing where I believed my identity was shaped and the story of my life had a certain narrative that almost couldn't be deviated from. That was a lot to do with identity, how people had treated me and what people had said about my future and who I could become. And as part of that journey, as the evolution of my life went along, I realized that I had this view of where I wanted my life to be over here. And I was so far away from that at my deepest point in the darkest hole. And I realized the only way to get to where I wanted to go was to take control of my life and to work back towards that. So the work that I do is really in two parts. It's about helping to try and intercept young people so that they don't have to make the same mistakes that I did and give them the opportunity to author the story of their life through making good choices aligned with who they are, and also helping those that have gone through hardship, as we all do, but in particular difficult childhoods. And then the other part of my mission is about creating some systemic change. So it's still about authorship and rewriting a different ending to the story for our nation and the way that we stand up for and deliver protection for all children.
What's the driver? What's the fuel for the passion?
Well, for me, again, I came from a particularly difficult background. I can share a little bit about that if that would be, I suppose, helpful for the audience to give some context. Yeah. So before I was born, my life had already had a pretty significant shaping, like a darkness around it. So when my mum was 16, she was a prodigy child. So she was training with the New Zealand Olympic swimming team. She was taking the highest level piano exams in the nation with the likes of the greatest students. And she was already about to leave school early to attend university. And one afternoon, she made a bad choice, as young people do, and she got on the back of a motorbike with a boyfriend that she wasn't supposed to have at the time. And as they were cruising home, they came to a roundabout when a vehicle clipped to the back of the bike and sent her flying. She was instantly knocked unconscious, raced to hospital, placed onto a ventilator for life support. She could no longer breathe on her own. And the doctors soon met my grandparents, who said that she would never be anything more than a bedside vegetable. And after much agonizing, my grandparents decided to switch off the machine, keeping her alive. But she breathed on her own. She stayed in a coma. She was brain dead it was 6 months in total. And then one day she woke up. But the person who woke up was no longer that prodigy child. She was now had a permanent disability, brain damaged, paralyzed down her entire right side. Her life was gone. That one choice took away every other choice she would ever make. Yeah. And then 10 years later, she met my biological father, who had a 20-year heroin addiction, had some heavy involvement in gangs. And one night he snuck into her room and he raped her. And that's how I was conceived. So I came into this world under this very dark cloud. Right? My identity in part had already been shaped. There was no fresh slate coming into this world. There was this heaviness around me. And my mum instantly rejected me as soon as I was born. I had my first psychology appointment at 2 years old because she tried to kill me because I reminded her of being raped. And that was my entrance into the child protection mental health world. Between 2 and 15, I saw about 20 different clinicians. So between child psychologists, psychotherapists, psychiatrists, counselors, doctors, so on. And I learnt through my journey that the system was more interested in discovering what was wrong with me than they were in discovering why I had the problems I did. So I was labeled as a problem child. I was medicated. I was diagnosed. And at 9 years old, I attended a session, yelled at the psychiatrist, and I was asking why I had to come to these appointments when it was me who was being abused. They knew that I was turning up with injuries. They knew the circumstances of what was going on. I disclosed all of this over and over again. I went to another doctor's appointment with a GP at 11, and in front of my mum, I begged to be taken away because I was sick of being hurt. It started another report with child protection. The police got involved. That case worker eventually left child protection, and the case was lost for 2.5 years. And then when it was finally picked up again, they closed it because they said there was no further reports. But not because I was out of danger, but because I decided to shut my mouth because it was safer to be quiet because I knew help wasn't coming. Mm. So left home at 15, broken, destroyed, but thought that my problems would stop because I was no longer in that circumstance. I just didn't realize I was traumatized and that no matter where I went, the problems would follow me. So I led this highly self-destructive life, destroying my life and the life of everyone else's around me until I got to the point of rehab at 30 years old. And now I'm linking back to where this passion comes in from is when I sat in rehab on my 30th birthday, I wondered how I'd got there. Like I'd never meant to be in a place like so low. My life had, in my best intentions, I had run my life into the ground. And the evidence was the fruit of the life and the way I was living. And as I sat in this rehab and I thought about where I'd be in a year, I realized if I carried on down the path, I'd either end up in prison or dead. And the only other option was to change. So that was the moment where I decided that I was going to, although I couldn't change my past, I could redesign and write a future that I thought was worthy of where I could go. And during that process, so that's been a little over 8 years. So I've been 8 years sober last month. And it's certainly been a journey, but it's been a journey of reclaiming my life, overcoming addiction, overcoming extreme adversity, but taking all of the hardship and understanding that without what I'd gone through, I would not have the gifts, the insight, the ability to be able to do the work that I do, to not only help those that are going through struggles and challenges of their own, to encourage them to know that we can all rewrite our story at any point in time, should we decide that nothing is ever set in stone. We can change as often as we like and evolve and metamorphosize, but also to be able to have the credibility and the experience to understand what it's like to have been failed by the system and to see where it needs to change to ensure definitive protection for children. Because I have thousands of people that reach out to me through social media and things like that, sharing their story about exactly what's happened with them also. And it's so sad because lives are irrevocably destroyed because of the foundation of not only the injustice of being failed by family often, but then also the injustice of not having the defense of a system which has this overarching stewardship responsibility to protect children. And it's the double injustice. It's like it creates this identity hack inside people, where one of the greatest things that I've learned in recent years is that our worth is not defined by how badly someone else treats us. It's actually a reflection on their worth, not ours. Our worth is never diminished because people treat us badly or say bad things about us. It doesn't actually, it shouldn't take away from our worth. But unfortunately, we somehow have this disposition, I think, in our human nature to believe that the way other people treat us actually is a reflection on our value and our worth. And that for me was a big revelation.
Wow, there's so much in there. So let's see how much we can squeeze into our time. But
So thank you for sharing and being so open with all that information. And it's not too dissimilar with my story. I grew up in the streets, and yeah, I had to break into houses to feed myself. And I remember having an epiphany as a youngster, standing on the side of the road, thinking, "Flop, I've got to do better at life because this is sucks pals." And I'd like to say I did better from that moment, but I did significantly worse after my aha moment. But when I look back on that story, your story, and other people that I'm familiar with who've trudged the hard road, they all say they wouldn't change it for nothing,
No.
which is wonderful. And I always reflect on that, going, and it's true for me, but how do I prevent my connections, my mates, my the youngsters that are in my circle of influence from having to pay that heavier school fee?
Yeah, I had a similar conversation with someone that I was speaking at an event last night, and it was just this interesting way I think of redemption almost. I have a very strong faith as part of my journey, and I think as the state of the world, unfortunately, I don't think engenders great growth. People go through a lot of pain and hardship. It's not a utopia. So
Yeah,
it's I think the way that we respond to the circumstances of life, but there is redemption and great redemption and being able to take, I believe, the hardest things that we've gone through and then use them to be of great service to humanity. There's redemption and healing in that arc of
yeah,
like the hero's journey story. And it's the qualifications that we get from wearing the scars of having gone through the hardest things that then the lived experience makes us credible. It gives us the ability to be able to help navigate because the hero's journey I'm fascinated by, but the hero was never about making heroes. It was always about making guides or sages that were able to help shine the light and shine a torch for other
yeah,
people to follow. And I work a lot with different organizations that are slowly getting better, but nowhere near where they should be about how we can embed lived experience within these organizations rather than just relying on professional expertise. Like especially when it comes to child protection reform and using lived experience. Because I give this an analogy like this, where it's all well and good to have a perfectly architecturally designed house. You've employed the best architects, the best engineers, you've laid the best foundation, and they go, "This place is schmick."
yeah,
And then a little boy walks up and goes, "Uh, I can tell you where it rains in a storm." And they go, "Nah, don't worry about it. We know it was designed perfectly. It's not possible." And he goes, "But look at me. I'm wet." And unfortunately, I think we live in a world today still where we just continue to rely on professional expertise
yeah,
without bringing in a different line of sight
yeah.
that could help us to navigate where things break down.
Now, I like that idea of a different line of sight. And so I'm one of those clinicians that you referenced there. That's one of the hats I wear. And I
Mm.
have a number of mates that wear those kind of hats. So with that in mind, I like that statement. Um, they spend time trying to work out what's wrong with me rather than what's happening to me.
Mm.
So what is your message to help me and my mates that aren't they're intrinsically doing their best.
Mm.
They're not setting out to do a poor job, but to give them, I don't know, a nudge, and whatever the magical word is, to consider. Hang on a minute.
Mm.
There's another angle to this particular picture that if you stand around the corner, you get a different.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think a big part of this, the lived experience movement, and what I see when I read a lot of reports about child sex abuse, about all that kind of thing in particular, is I hear this archetypal child crying off the pages to say, "Why didn't you notice? Why didn't you see? Why didn't you listen? Why did I have to advocate for myself? You're the parent. You should understand." And I think one of the things in circumstances like this, of where I've walked into rooms where I've had many professionals, is just to listen to the child's voice. If a child's asking for help, it, children don't communicate the way adults do. right?
Yeah.
And a lot of the time, when it comes to disclosure of child sex abuse in particular, a lot of the time, because there's so much shame and fear that's put on because of perpetrators, the way that they tell them that they'll be killed, their parents will discredit them or not believe them, children will come forward and they'll often not just disclose in outright frank language exactly what's happened to them. A, probably because they don't have the language for it. And
Yeah.
B, because of the shame and the fear, they may say, blah, blah, blah was hurting me,
Yeah.
right? And then, depending on the response they get, they'll be able to then disclose further. So they'll try little nuggets of disclosure. But I think when it comes to the way I'm bringing this back to the question that you asked, is that if a child is saying something that doesn't sound like the norm, or it requires some real emotional, intelligent listening and probing of questions. Kids don't just come and start disclosing things for no reason,
Mm.
right? So I was
Yeah.
in an environment where people didn't ask the next question. They didn't listen to why. They didn't look at all of the patterns of the behavior. Again, right? Like how many kids display extremely overt hypersexuality from 3 to 4 years old, and no one's picking up and wondering why those sorts of behaviors are there. And then when kids are talking about the sort of things they're asking to be removed from home, and I think there's a lot more tick boxing going on than people stopping and looking exactly what's in front of them
Yeah.
and using their ability to be able to work out and forensically investigate
Yeah.
what's happening.
It is a challenging platform when you start going down that path because there's this tension between honoring the client, honoring the system that like puts you there, and honoring the parent. And so there's all these tensions. And so how do you cut through that sort of tape? How do you silence the voices is the best terminology I can think of.
I think one of my great concerns in the work that I'm really trying to bring to the fore is having everything looked through when it comes to particular child protection and these associated areas, whether it's
Yeah.
child psychology and psychotherapy and this kind of world, because obviously you're talking about that from a clinical kind of stance point,
Yeah.
is everything needs to be child first rather than we don't have child first
Yeah.
procedures. Most things are ticking of boxes or policies or budgets or that kind of thing. And again, I look at it through the lens of would I accept this for my own child? And I think if the system very simply looked at everything through this as going, are we putting the child first or are we putting our procedures and policies first? I think we'd have a very different lot of outcomes for children. And fundamentally, at the end of the day, everything to do with everything we're talking about is whether or not the child is safe. So my question is, well, are they?
Yeah.
Is the child safe?
Yeah.
And if the child's not safe, well, then I think we have to ask more questions and better questions, because at the moment, there are many children that just aren't safe and they're
Yeah.
not getting the help that they deserve. If they, at what point does it get picked up that kids are going through dangerous situations? Is it the GP, then the counselor, then like if children are ending up in psychology offices and psychotherapy and things like that, why?
Mm.
Why? Like,
Yeah.
it's people from really good families are not typically the ones that end up committing a lot of violent crime.
Yeah.
It just there's chains of events that end up leading people to those things, and I think that they're symptomatic of people having gone through difficult experiences. And I think if we just stopped and look at the evidence of what's gone on in people's lives and actually stop to actually try and understand with kids and to look through a different perspective. I mean, play therapy. I had only one psychiatrist that was using play therapy to try and understand more about what was going on. A lot of the time, again, kids don't have the language to be
Yeah.
able to speak about this sort of thing. I know it's highly complex. It's purely about being able to have more of a conversation about utilizing the expertise and the caring people that are in the world
Yeah.
and that are able to help children. But between how many people come into a child's life, teachers, people in religious positions, daycares, all mental health professionals, doctors, at what point should some of these things be picked up? Because I completely got missed by a great number of people.
I had just this week, I was in a discussion, and the discussion was about reporting. So at what point do you report? And it was in relations to clinical work. And there was a lot of us in the room, and there was a fairly large discussion, and there was the navigation of who do you tell, when do you tell, all those sort of things. And I listened for some time, and then I asked if I could be the devil's advocate, and I said, when we introduce a client or introduce ourselves to a client, we tell them the duty of care that we have, and that if there's harm to themselves or anybody else, that we're going to report. That's part of our speech. We all give it. We all know it off by heart. And I said, and I've now listened to this 10-minute discussion about should I or shouldn't I report, and the emotions that drive this decision. And I wonder if we just take the emotions out and go, is this person safe, yes or no? If the answer is no, then report. Does that shorten this conversation and we move on to the next topic? And, well, that wasn't the end of the discussion. The discussion went on, but a couple came after and said, oh, geez, we just need to simplify it to, is this person safe, yes or no?
Yeah.
No, let's report. And then at the very least, there's one step in that direction that you're talking about. So I think if you're listening and you're in that clinical space, I want to encourage you to consider this idea of setting the emotions a bit aside and going, is this person safe, yes or no? If the answer is no, for whatever reason, or another person is not safe, start the reporting process, and we will become more comfortable as a cohort around that reporting, and then maybe some of these things will get caught along the way.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. If it's as simple as, and this is the language that I use, is for child protection, it doesn't matter if you followed your procedure. It doesn't matter if you ticked a box. It didn't matter. It doesn't matter. The question that I've got is, was the child safe? And if you can't say yes, well then we've got an issue. There's an issue here between the way that the system is functioning. And I applaud that view. I think the next then question, which is the big question for me, is then, well, what happens when the system that you're reporting to doesn't do what it's supposed to be doing?
Yes.
What do you do? What do you do then? Because, and this is the thing, like I had a lady come up to me last night after I spoke, and she was in tears because she works at a school with some extremely challenged people that have dropped out of school, and they've come to try and they've just come from bad families. She was talking about this 15-year-old boy who's come back to do his HSC because he's got addiction problems, and he's about to have a baby, right? So he made the decision to come back to school to get his, I think it was his year 10 certificate or something like that. And she was just so upset because he's basically living on the streets, already committing crime, got full-on drug addiction, and about to have a baby. And she's like, I just want to take you in because I know that the system can't support you. And that's what, and it's this responsibility. She goes, I can't, first of all, I can't, I can't take you because I'm a teacher. That would be stepping across some kind of boundary, professional boundary. But then on top of that, the system's not providing you the support that it's needed. So what do we do? What do you do as a clinician? What do you do when you know that a child or someone's in danger, and then you report it and they don't get the support they need? Well, how do we navigate that?
And is that uncertainty on how to navigate it in the awkwardness of the discussion? So if there was more confidence, and I'm only reflecting on that particular meeting that I was in because it was literally yesterday, so it's fresh in my mind. And when you watch the body language of the people that are navigating this, should I report, shouldn't I report, and you listen to the language, there's this, I'm just nervous. Like, I don't want to get this wrong. I don't want to be judged. I don't want to, it's awkward. It's scary. And then I think, is that the reason why nobody touches it? Because we go, oh, it's just, oh. But if we got more confident and we got it right a few times, we got it wrong a few times, but we just normalized it, then maybe we'll have the confidence to go, well, I'm not really sure, but I'm just going to check. Like, even if you judge me.
I mean, I think yes, and I mean, what's going to happen? I think people have this. We can often feel guilty. I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday who runs about 12 childcare centres, and part of their procedure is whenever there's obviously like some kind of injury which is accidental, they obviously have to report it. It's just part of their procedure. Like as an example, there was a little kid at one of their childcare centres that was pulling on a set of drawers, and as the drawer comes out, it's got a safety lock, right? So it jars, and a little kid dislocated their elbow, right,
Oh,
like
yeah,
falling backwards.
yeah,
And then the staff don't want to report that because they think it's going to get them in trouble because this kid got injured on their
yeah,
watch.
yeah,
And this is just a very small example of how I think the mentality works of people worrying about what's going to happen. Am I going to get in trouble? And then at the end of the day, it's not putting the child first. And this is, again, always, as far as I'm concerned, the problem was, is the child safe? Is the child safe?
yeah.
And again, what do you do? And I would be interested to hear your view of what the sort of thresholds are, the benchmarks are of when you make a decision around when to report, and then what to do around follow up. Because again, here in New South Wales, there's some considerable concern around the way that the Child Protection Agency, Department of Communities and Justice here, is not following up and following through on reports that do meet the threshold of risk of serious and significant harm.
Yeah.
There was a big report by the Audit Office of New South Wales, which came back in 2022, and it reported that of the 400,000 reports that met the threshold for presumed to be at risk of significant harm, they closed 75% of all of those cases, 85,000 children's cases, without a caseworker investigating or doing an in-home inspection. And when that, I'm talking about what I can go far more into detail about exactly what that instilled in me as an identity of my
Yeah.
worth, where I went, the addiction, the hypersexualization of the journey that I took, and the self-destructiveness and the self-sabotaging behavior, because no one ever modeled for me that
Yeah.
my life had worth.
I don't think I can answer that question on the threshold outside of, is this person safe? Yes or no? Okay, it's not. And then hopefully, because once you report it, it does kind of leave your hands. And then, so you ask, where's my responsibility then in the checkup of that particular person? And I don't think I have an answer for you just yet. So I'm going to ponder that question for a bit.
Just jumping back in, and totally, and it's just a question, but this is how you can very quickly see where children would fall
Yeah,
through the
yeah,
cracks.
absolutely.
And I think it's one of these really important questions. I love that we're having this discussion. I love that you coincidentally, I don't believe in coincidence, but coincidentally had this discussion yesterday with your
Yeah,
colleagues
yeah.
around, well, how do we just, what's the most basic benchmark? Well, are they, I think that's fantastic. Why can't we just incorporate that?
But I wonder if we can take one step back and go, is this a larger problem in the context of the way we perceive our weaknesses? So one of the things that floats my boat is that if I'm perfectly made and inherently in me, I'm wired with anger, fear, anxiety, frustration, all those big emotions that are labeled bad, if that's intrinsically wired in me and I'm perfectly made for such a time as this, then it can't be bad. It's got to be there for something. Then what is it? If I get angry and it's not bad, if I can be brave enough to look at my anger and go, that's not bad, then what is it? And if it's something other than bad, then maybe it's an indicator. Maybe it's telling me something. Maybe it's a warning light. Maybe it's any number of things. And if I can see it as an indicator, as a warning light, as an information beacon, then all of a sudden it's about how I react with that anger that becomes the problem. The anger is not the problem, it's my reaction to the problem. And when I start adopting that principle to all these things that I've deemed as failures, then I can report the kid who hurt his arm because the drawer jar, he fell off the drawer, because now it's not a failure, it's an indicator that, oh, that draw hook thing doesn't actually work well, or it's flawed in its, because it's no longer good or bad. It's one of my absolute favorite sayings is that it's not good information, not bad information, it's just information.
Mm.
When I can drop the emotional baggage associated to the information, Now I've got choice, which is why I liked your thing of choice. So I've got choice. Here's the data. What do you want to do with the data, Rodney? Do you want to dig into it? What do you want to do? It's not disqualifying you from the game. It's not doing anything other than presenting data to you, and now the choice is with you. What do you want to do with it? And then I think if I can change my mindset as an adult in that, and my mate's mindset in that, and we can report the draw, now all of a sudden we can report here's a mate that's sitting in front of us, and the story, the dots just aren't adding up, and that's okay.
I love that. I don't know how many people have that level of emotional intelligence.
That's my mission.
That's the thing. Like, but why should this be exclusive, and why should it, like, why aren't we getting this kind of education in our schooling system, or just in society in general? There's so much for me in conversations like this where it's phenomenal that we have podcasting and platforms where people like you can raise a voice and raise awareness around being able to ask these types of questions. I would just love for this to have, and it just is, I'm just commenting on what I see in the world, is that people don't have these types of conversations, I don't think, frequently in their day-to-day life. It's not that normalized. But
Yeah,
I completely agree with you. I'm angry. I'm super angry. I'm angry about the way that the world is functioning.
yeah,
And I've again, lived with a lot of destructive anger through my life, and it very much led to me wanting to destroy myself,
yeah,
because it was only much later on that I came across the best psychotherapist that I've ever had, and he said one day, just point blank, he goes, "Mate, your mum's no longer here. You don't need to continue on abusing yourself on her behalf." And I was like, "Oh, we're just like, I got far out, like the abuse was so good that I became my own abuser."
yeah, yeah,
And it requires some real ability to sit in what's uncomfortable and be introspective and to go inside. And I do think this is the great responsibility. I think you touch on, and the thing that, when you're talking about what you are, for me, it's this question of aligning the way that we act and behave and show ourselves to the world, to our conscience. And the reason why I'm doing the work that I do is because I can, and also because my conscience says I must.
yeah,
If I can, then I must. And it's one of these things, I think, I'm trying to apply that in
yeah.
all the different areas of my life. I do think we know the things that we should be doing, and there's often a disconnect between the things that we know we should be doing and actually doing them.
Yeah. But do you think the language is getting, or the discussion is getting out there? Like I've had, this is a great conversation, but I have had many other conversations like that. And whilst we're not seeing the pendulum shift just yet, there's definitely a leak around the tap,
Yeah,
it's coming.
definitely. And it's exactly the same with disclosure of all the kinds of things that are going on. People are feeling, these bigger movements, the Me Too movement. People
Yeah.
are speaking more and more about this stuff. I think social media has been good for people being able to have more awareness of what is going on in the world, certainly. And for me, maybe I have a slightly biased opinion, because these are the kinds of conversations I endeavor to have in my everyday life.
Yeah.
I don't speak much about the weather. I speak
Yeah.
more about this kind of stuff. And I do think there's an elevation of consciousness within our society. So we're certainly getting to a better place.
Yeah.
And people, I think, also in with the social media world that we have, I think our society does recognize the amount of disconnection that people experience now, and people are longing for it.
Yeah.
So obviously, there's going to probably be a swing towards looking for how to rediscover what really lights people up and the
Yeah.
purpose of life, and this is a fundamental part of it.
Yeah, yeah. And I wonder if even if we introduce that idea to that topic, as we start expanding these conversations, and our average mate on the street that has never considered gets into this awkward conversation, but then there's awareness that it's not good information, not bad, it's just information. And if we're brave enough to lean into it, there might be a pot of gold there. Then he might, the adoption process might speed up.
Mate, I think it's brilliant. I think if we can all just go, are we okay with just being uncomfortable for, can we
Yeah,
have a conversation about
brilliant.
this? I went through a few, I don't have New Year's resolutions, but a few years ago, I made the choice to put myself in as many uncomfortable positions as I could possibly because I knew it was going to lead to growth. So
Yeah,
I constantly did things that challenged me just because I knew that through the experience of, I used to struggle with a lot of anxiety. And I knew that the only way to overcome it was to be very intentional about putting myself in safe ways of being able to stretch myself outside of the glass box that was
yeah,
closing in. So I would think all the time about what it is I'm specifically afraid of in this instance. Then I would do the thing. And then afterwards I would review the thing and go, did that thing I was so afraid of happen? And it
yeah,
really helped me to learn that every single time the worst thing I thought was going to happen didn't happen. And
yeah,
it really helped to stretch me from out of it. And it was a very intentional, purposeful thing. And I think we could apply that to this. It's like,
yeah,
can we be okay with being uncomfortable because we might
yeah.
learn something?
Absolutely. Maybe that's our takeaway from today is be comfortable with the uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Like let's make that part of our movement and our everyday goal.
Mm.
There's so much richness at the footstep of your uncomfortable. And in clinician work time, one of my favorite moments is when there's the awkward silence. I get so excited when it's the
Hmm.
awkward silence because something amazing is about to go down. And I work with a lot of younger clinicians, and they you can see the sweat, and they're busting, and eventually they say something, and I'm like, oh, you lost it. The gold is on its way, and you said something. Let's just sit in that silence, and that when our mate says something, whatever it is, it's gonna be really good. But you got to sit in that uncomfortable bit. But
Like the clinician's version of a staring contest,
yeah,
when
that's
it's like you
right.
try not to blink.
Yeah, and I had to laugh because last week I pretended to be a client for one of these people. We had this discussion, and of course was the client, but I went into that awkward silence, and she just looked at me. I'm like, "You're not breaking me, pal." I'm like, "Oh, my job is done." It was so good.
No.
If you're listening, I hope today's conversation will begin to put the spotlight on a bit of grace for ourselves. We're not bad, we're not flawed, we're not failed. Despite what the mass may say, despite what the rhetoric might say, despite what your neighbor might say, whatever the data is, it's just data. And you can one of my I have a bit of an accounting background, and an accountant, if he doesn't say what you want him to say, you just get a different accountant because the numbers can say whatever they want. You can make them say whatever you want them to say. And we can do that with our data as well. Yes, I can be bad, but I can also be learning, or I'm about to excel, or all those things are also true in that same statement. I think if you had to give us a golden nugget sort of towards the end, Jason, what do you think would be that nugget that you would leave us, that would leave us pondering?
Mate, I think it just tags perfectly off the back of that is that one of the most powerful things that I realized in my life is nothing is permanent. We can change so quickly. I see people paralyzed at taking jobs or trying new things, going and living overseas because it might not work out. And we we can always evolve. We can always go back. We can always change. When I moved to Australia from New Zealand, I'd never been to Sydney and I booked my flights 10 days before because I just needed a change. And I was like, if it doesn't work, I'm just going to go home. I'm still
Yeah,
here 16 years later.
yeah,
But it's nothing is ever permanent if we decide that we want it to be different. And trying things to see if we actually want like something or not like something. As you say, it's information. It helps point our navigation system more towards
yeah,
what it is that we do want. So my foundational message is that we can't change the past, but we can always author a different ending to the story. And the question for me is always, who is holding the pen? Is
Yeah.
it other people's opinions, other people's views of us, self-doubt, all that kind of thing?
Yeah.
Because the pen is what obviously writes the story.
Yeah.
And if we're the ones to take the pen back, we can author whatever story that we want, no matter where we've come from. And that, I think, is a really powerful, liberating thing, is that we can be authors in harmony with God about our destiny.
I'm so glad you gave me that story, because I collect pens, and my wife's always like, "Why do you collect pens?" Now I've got a reason.
Yeah.
So I'm busy writing my story now. Back it up. That's so good. And so tell me about your services, and where, if someone is interested in those services, how do they find you? What's the platforms?
For sure. I'm all over social media. Mostly my handle is jason.p.blythe, but jasonblythe.com is my website. I am a speaker, so I speak a lot about the power of choice. That's my signature style message. I run workshops as well around reclaiming the pen, and we look at, some of the hardest things in life. I believe that pain is a great initiator. So the hardships are what produces refining gold. Diamonds are produced under pressure. Olive oil and wine were two of the most valuable products in ancient times, but it wasn't the olives or the grapes that were valuable. Their worth was only produced after they'd been crushed. So it's about looking at the crushing moments and the gifts that they give us that can then be used in service to humanity. Of course, I do more lived experience advisory for different organizations around how to embed more child safe methods as well. And I have started a movement which is the Child First movement, which is around systemic accountability and supporting people that have gone through similar failings to me as well. But my website's probably the best place to go.
Yeah, awesome. And so who's typically the person that's deploying your services?
Corporate, schools, different churches. I do a lot of stuff through Professional Speaking Australia. But if it's more things like advisory, it's the big frontline organisations. I would love a seat at the table at the likes of Department of Peace and Justice here in New South Wales, and in some of the more government facilities, working with some councils as well, because a lot of them do also have things like childcare centres and stuff.
Yeah.
So helping them around safeguarding and abuse prevention training, but yeah, also just community advocacy. So here in New South Wales, part of the work that I'm trying to do is get mandatory abuse and safeguarding education incorporated as part of the Working with Children check, because it's people just have no idea how grooming and predatory behaviour works. So why not make millions of the public sentinels to help
Yeah.
make predators, it's harder for them to operate.
Yeah, that's right. So I'm always intrigued because I've had a look at your services and your platforms, and it's great. But I'm always intrigued when people are on those platforms, they go, "There's that platform I'm not on, but I really think I would bring value to." What's your platform that you're not on that you think I should be on that platform?
I haven't utilized YouTube in the way that I want to. I am on there, but I have not. Just a time thing. I love writing speeches, and it's part of one of my gifts. I've done music at a very very high level, and I love speech writing. I love thought provoking kind of content which challenges the status quo. So I'd like to create, and do have plans to create, more long form speech type content, which just gets people to think, asks challenging questions, and gets people to try and kind of expand their consciousness through uncomfortable, uncomfortable topics, just
Yeah.
social justice type of conversations. But that would be, I'm on most of them, but that would be something that I want to incorporate as part of my evolution of what I deliver to the public.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Well, I wish you well in all of that. And Jason, I really enjoyed our conversation, and I have more thoughts, but all in good time. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, mate. I really appreciate it. And also from your professional perspective as well. I think these are really healthy conversations. And if our nation and just the public adopted more of these kinds of conversations, being open to have them, I think we will rapidly evolve and have a much better nation.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Your Truth Explored. If today's episode resonated with you, please take a moment to follow the podcast and share it with someone who might benefit from the conversation. Your support helps these messages reach the people who need them most. If you'd like to explore your own truths more deeply, you're welcome to connect with me at yourtruthservices.com.au about coaching or counseling bookings. Also available on that website is our other resources such as music, books, and videos. Until next time, take care and stay connected to your truth.